Hi, kia ora, and welcome to Creative Connections, where we have beautiful, inspiring conversations with artists living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkich. My guest this week is Vicki Fox. Vicki founded Quirky Fox Art Gallery in 2012. It is located in Hawera, a small town of only 10,000 people south of New Plymouth. Showcasing both established and emerging talents, Quirky Fox invites both New Zealand and international artists to be part of its carefully curated range. All international artists are exclusive to the gallery within New Zealand, while New Zealand artists are exclusive to the gallery within Taranaki. Quirky Fox aims to provide a home for artists working in new, contemporary and representational styles and introduce their works to both a New Zealand and international audience. This episode is a really great insight into how a person can get over challenges and use their strengths to create and work on something they are passionate about. Vicki Fox has lived her whole life with a speech impediment. As a child and young person, she was teased, and she never felt she fitted in, even feeling like a misfit at times throughout her life. As she got older, she has come to the realization that the things she was teased about are actually the really interesting, fun parts of her personality. In this chat, Vicki shares how she finds her artists and builds her network, what she looks for in an artist, and her expectations and management of artists both in New Zealand and internationally. We discuss her advice to artists approaching her gallery, how she feels about artists experimenting and changing their style, why she is against AI, pricing work, which is her least favourite part of the business, the development of her newly renovated gallery space, and her exhibition schedule. Thank you, ngā mihi, to Vicki for agreeing to have this chat with me, something I know she had reservations about. I think her story will inspire you. As you may know, at the moment Creative Connections does not receive formal funding. Some generous listeners have chosen to support us with a monthly donation of $3, $5, $8 or $10. If you'd like to contribute in this way, you can click a link which is in the show notes to set up your donation. The link is also on the Creative Connections Instagram profile. It's really easy to set up. And the great thing is you can cancel anytime. Thank you so much. Every cent is truly appreciated and ensures the continuation and development of the podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode. I certainly enjoyed meeting Vicki, and I have great respect for all the things that she's achieving. Good morning, Vicki.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's lovely to meet you. It's a very different podcast episode in some ways because I am speaking to a gallerist and a gallery owner, which is amazing. I feel like this gallery is bringing something a little bit different to New Zealand art, which is fantastic, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself? I know that you started Quirky Fox in 2012. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the gallery business in the beginning.
I really got into the gallery by mistake. It was an accident. I was in a job that I weren't happy at, and I may have accidentally quit that job without actually thinking it through and had to work out what I was going to do. Instead, my parents had always been self-employed and hard workers. I looked at other jobs in the area I was working in. I couldn't find anything I really wanted to do, so I decided to give it a go. It started off a little bit more as a design and gift shop, and I had a couple of artists. But I realised picking things from a catalogue was incredibly boring. It didn't give me any mental stimulation. So I got more and more into working with artists, individual artists rather than stockists. I made some incredible friends and connections. I took a few risk along the way, I contacted my first international artist, was an artist I had admired for years, and I literally emailed him thinking, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone on the other side of the world can laugh at me and I'm never going to know. And it's grown from there. I've transitioned from a little tiny shop into a lovely new space and taken along framing as part of it as well. So as well as the gallery, I offer framing services, and the framing's been really helpful in that it has allowed me to do something really different with the gallery. I haven't had to follow what other New Zealand galleries are doing. I'm very careful that I don't actually follow any New Zealand galleries. I don't want to be influenced in that way. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is very much me and the business. So it's evolved over time and become something
that you're proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you should be. And so your gallery, Quirky Fox, is in Hawera, which is out of New Plymouth in South Taranaki. So, you are not only contending with presenting work that is a little bit, maybe you could say, not all that mainstream at times. Is that how you describe it?
There's some work that some people find confronting. But I actually think that's a really good thing. It definitely isn't mainstream. You will not find any abstract in the gallery. I only deal with representational art. So that is artwork that you can look at and identify something. And that doesn't mean that it's an actual animal or an actual person. It can be a dragon or a unicorn or something completely made up of different elements, but you'll be able to see something that you recognized in it. And I definitely get a few comments where people don't expect the gallery to be where it is. I get some comments where people don't like particular bits of art for certain reasons. But I think that's part of the beauty of it, is actually getting to observe those different human reactions and working out why different people react to different pieces the way they do. So if we just had art that everybody liked, it would be incredibly boring.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the choices of artists and artwork for you is quite unique, and you are probably pushing boundaries maybe a bit more than your average gallery does. And what I was going to say about, having a gallery like that in Hawera, which is, small town New Zealand, 10,000 people, it's probably, I imagine, even more conservative in some ways down there. So I feel like you've taken a risk, but it's something you obviously believe in.
It hasn't been easy. I know when I very first started and I were all of 30 and I had a mortgage and I went to a town business get together and I went to two, and at both of them I was told that either people wouldn't come into my shop or I would never succeed, because it wasn't what people were used to. That was confronting and scary, but I think that it also made me more determined to prove them wrong. But it doesn't always happen for people. And I've never been one of those people that has fitted in easily. And in a small town, that can be a challenge, but it also makes you believe in yourself too. And as you get older, I've come to recognize that all the things that made me weird and not fit in as a kid, actually the really interesting, fun parts of my personality. And I found artists that have similar views on life and look at things a little bit differently. And that's definitely become a strength of the gallery. And part of that comes down to those early people that didn't believe I could make it work and just proving them wrong, being stubborn enough to go, well, let's see.
Yeah, and good on you. I've got so much respect for you for taking that risk and for sort of putting yourself out there. And you have lived with a speech impediment all of your life. And it's so amazing to hear, as we spoke before recording, that it's actually you are seeing it, like you said now, as a bit of a gift and something that you can then sort of channel in a positive way. How have you found that's helped you?
Absolutely. I mean, again, going back as a child, anybody that's different for any reason gets picked on. And probably even more so nowadays with social media, and you don't leave school at school. It can follow you wherever you go. And it can be hard and it has a toll on your mental health and your self-confidence. I was discussing it with a friend on the weekend, and it's very strange that I never saw myself as someone with a lot of self-confidence, but I have very strong boundaries. And I think the two don't necessarily go hand in hand, that you have strong boundaries if you have self-confidence, that having strong boundaries can help you and it helps grow your self-confidence over time too. Not letting people step on you because they see you a certain way. With my speech impediment, I have had people assume that I'm a lot dumber than what I am, or I'm ignorant. And sometimes it can actually be quite powerful to show people that their preconceived notions are completely wrong. And it can be a motivator to prove them wrong
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I can see that. Without sounding condescending, I think you're being quite brave just getting out there and you've got such a public job and you've obviously got your head around all of that.
I've never really seen it as a public job. To me, the gallery is about the artist, and the artists are first and foremost, and I just happen to be behind the scenes pulling it together. They are no gallery exists without its artists. Artists can exist without galleries these days. It's not easy, but it is possible, and there are artists doing it and doing it well. But so I've always seen it as I'm just behind the scenes, and that's where I'm happy to be. The artists are what makes the gallery what it is.
Yeah. But then you are still interacting with the public and the people that come into the store and into the gallery and talking to them about art. So you've obviously sort of got to that point where you're very authentic and you are who you are.
I would like to think so. As we mentioned before we started recording, to me, art is all about connections, and it is connecting with a piece of art means that that bit of art is always going to be meaningful for you. You don't buy art, in my view anyway, art that you buy just because it's pretty or it's trending or it happens to match the couch. It doesn't have any meaning long term. But if you find a bit of art you connect to, then 10, 20 years down the track, that meaning might have changed, but you still connect to it. And the only way I can do the right thing by my artists and also the people buying the art is to be authentic and help those connections happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very special and unique. It's something that you're offering your audience, that not everybody does.
I hope that's what people get out of that experience.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. So let's just talk about your stable of artists. You have something in your mind of the type of artist or the type of work that you want to show. What are you actually thinking? What are you wanting to represent?
A lot of the time, I look at the artists themselves and what they are like to work with. I'm pretty close to a lot of my artists. I keep in regular contact with my artists, as well as the public Facebook or social media side to the gallery. I have a private group for my artists so that we're talking, keeping in touch. And I've learned a lot about the different challenges my artists face. So that's one of the really important things to me, is to have artists that I can communicate with. And I've been lucky enough to discover that a lot of the artists that we call talented, they've gone a long way to develop their skills because they feel like they're not good enough. And so they work so hard to develop their skills, whereas the artists that think they're amazing, they don't necessarily work on developing those skills, and they can come across as a little bit arrogant sometimes, and that's not the type of person I'm drawn to, and it's not someone I find I can communicate well with. So I'm very lucky in that regard that I do get to pick which artists I work with, and a big degree comes down to who they are personally and how we connect.
Mm.
And then in terms of the actual artwork itself, I only work with representational artists, so you won't find any abstracts in the gallery. You will always find something that you can recognise in some form. And then I think, would I be happy to have it in my home, even if it's a piece that challenges me? Is there an aspect that draws me to it? Is it the attention to detail? Is it the technique used? Because we all have different voices and you don't have to like everything. Some art is meant to challenge you, and sometimes that's really interesting art to be surrounded by.
So how do you actually source your artists? I mean, obviously there's the option for artists to approach you, which we'll talk about in a minute. But do you follow artists around the world and then sort of
I,
decide who you'd like to represent?
I'm in a very lucky position now that I do get approached by a lot of artists, but I still do approach a lot of artists as well. I obviously use social media and I look through different artists and portfolios. That's sort of my hobby outside of work, is doom scrolling and find an artist I would like to work with. I'm also very fortunate that I have a wonderful relationship and friendship with Daniela from Beautiful Bizarre, which is a contemporary and representational art magazine. It's one of the leading ones in the world at the moment. And I've been fortunate enough to be a member of their jury panel, I believe 3 times now, in their annual art award. Their art award this year had over 3,000 entries from across the world. That's 3,000 artist portfolios that I'm looking at and discovering new artists that I may not have discovered on my own. So that's a wonderful tool to be able to look at.
Yeah.
And then the artists I already work with often refer me to other artists or send me clips. So it's in some ways quite organic, but it also has a lot of structure behind it.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose for artists who are making work of that nature are delighted to find, a place that actually wants to show their work because it isn't, the typical work that other galleries might be showing.
I think there's a growing audience and a growing number of galleries that are showing it. But in New Zealand, it is definitely a lot smaller
Yeah.
niche. And you might find one or two artists in a gallery of that style, but not a whole gallery just around that style. So I am very lucky that a lot of the artists I do approach are looking for representation. So it works really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you have the sort of international artists, and then you have New Zealand artists, and you say on your website that you like to be the sole representative
Yeah,
of the artists
yeah,
in the Taranaki region for New Zealand artists.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm in a small town and you have to give people a reason to go out of their way and visit a gallery. And unfortunately, a lot of New Zealand galleries have the same artist represented in them. So you get to go into a gallery in perhaps Auckland and you see an artist you really like, but then you see them in Wellington and Taupo and Dunedin. And I can't compete with those sort of places. We don't have much else to do in the town. It's not a tourist area. So I need to give people a reason to come and visit the gallery, to go out of their way to detour an hour south of New Plymouth and actually come into the town or go onto the website. So the only way I can do that, or the way I've approached it, is that when you come into the gallery, I want you to see artists that you've never seen before. And you go, oh, I haven't seen that. I don't want you to think, oh, I've seen that print in 10 other galleries, or you've seen it in your best friend's house and your neighbour's house. I want it to be something that you're proud to have in your house because you know that 1,000 other people aren't going to have that particular piece that represents who you are as a person, not what's on trend at the moment. So I am quite strict in how I represent my artists. And I do require that exclusivity that if they are New Zealand based artists, I do require that I'm the only Taranaki gallery. New Plymouth is only an hour away, and it's one of those things where to travel to New Plymouth is easy for people, but to travel the reverse is a hard journey. So you've got to make it worth it.
Yeah.
And with my international artists, our overall population is small. I've got artists that are showing in New York galleries and Los Angeles, San Francisco, London galleries. It's okay to have several galleries in that, say, London, because people won't visit there. But we don't even have the population of a suburb in London. So I've got to make sure that if the artists are going to send their work to me and I'm going to represent them, that I'm giving them the best possible opportunity to sell their work. And I can only do that if people know that if they don't get it, they're going to miss out. They're not going to be able to drive an hour up the road and find another piece like that.
Yeah.
Artist.
Yeah. And it feels like the nature of the work that you are showing does require that. Otherwise, yeah, it needs to be like a special kind of bespoke gallery, which it does seem to be. It is quite unique. And then people have to actually go there or get online to that particular gallery rather than spreading, yourself too thin, which I totally understand. I mean, I feel like you could almost be exclusive, sort of New Zealand wide. Have you ever considered that?
I have considered it a couple of times, um, but I also know that it's hard making a living as an artist in New Zealand. We have very few artists that can be full-time artists without support from external areas. So I don't want to hinder anybody in that way. I do want them to be able to enjoy the lifestyle they want. And sometimes it works out that you can work with other galleries too. And that's a good way of actually growing your network of possible customers and possible artists too. There are one or two New Zealand artists that I am lucky enough that only want to deal with me. I've got an exhibition coming up next year with Darktopia. They are a combination of a New Zealand and Australian couple. Unfortunately, they're both in Australia now, but because they started in New Zealand, it's always been under the understanding that they could be elsewhere, and they don't want to. They want to stick with me, which is really lovely and shows a lot of trust. And I have to make sure I earn that and keep it.
Yeah, that's so good. And obviously a lot of respect as well.
Absolutely.
And so you're international artists, you've approached somebody you like or they've approached you. How do you actually manage the work and the communications with someone who's not in New Zealand?
The internet is great. A lot of my communication is by email back and forth. I have a couple that I talk with and have become really good friends. I'm not someone that's naturally drawn to things like this or video chat. Text works really well, but it's also making sure that they know you can be trusted. So it's answering emails, answering messages, being open and authentic. And sometimes you have to just say, I don't know the answer. Particularly, for example, at the moment with the US and the tariffs, it has made things a little bit trickier for some of my American artists. And I've had to say to them, I need to find out more. I don't know at the moment. Just hold on a little bit and I'm going to get back to you. And I think saying that you don't know something, but being willing to find out, being curious, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough that going back to beautiful Bizarre and Daniela, I was lucky enough to go to Australia 4 years ago. I were invited over there for an exhibition open, and I met some incredible Australian artists over there. So it was really lovely to meet them face to face and have those conversations. But a lot of my artists, it's all been virtual. I haven't met them as such. But I think for some people, there's comfort in that too. It's having separation from what other people's expectations of you are and being influenced by that to just having a relationship that you've built from nothing with no expectation.
And do you find for the international artists that it is very expensive to actually ship artworks to you?
A lot of the time, my international artists will send them unframed rather than framed, and I do the framing for them. So they're presented framed in the gallery, but they've actually arrived unframed, and that's one way I can help them reduce the cost of postage, but also the risk. As soon as you put glaze and glass on a bit of art, you increase the risk of it being damaged. With some pieces, particularly if an artist is going through a tough time and I've been working with them for a while, it all depends on the individual artist. But I am very lucky in that regard that a lot of them are willing to take that risk. Sometimes it does mean pieces arrive a little bit late because they've had to be repacked in different ways to make it more affordable because the big box was too expensive. So we reduced the packaging or something like that. And definitely, as I mentioned, having the artist be able to send the works unframed, but still involving them in the framing process. So they are still making sure that their taste is represented and how the work is framed is a big difference I've found.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's such a fantastic service. I mean, I guess that adds to your workload. Not only are you doing the framing, but you're also having all that communication with the artists where they're making choices and you're kind of telling them what their options are. And so, that is adding to your work. But I think it's such a great idea and a great service for artists.
It's definitely a lot of communication, and it can be at strange hours sometimes, either their end or my end. I do get up early and I often finish late. I've always put that communication as a core part of the business, though, that there's got to be clear communication, there's got to be open communication, and my artists have got to feel comfortable asking me questions, just communicating in general. Yeah. It's got to be easy to do. I don't ever want someone to feel they don't want to reply to an email because it's too hard to deal with or something like that. And I often find myself saying in an email to an artist when they've apologised for a slow reply or something, please don't apologise because we're all juggling so much these days. Sometimes something has to give. And I'd rather you be comfortable enough dealing with me that you can actually go, Becky can go down the list a little bit. She's not going to get upset with me while I cover these things that need to be done straight away.
That's so lovely. And building that relationship is so important, isn't it? So if somebody's thinking, oh my God, I need to show my work at Quirky Fox, what is your advice for approaching you?
So I have a pretty strict submissions policy for the work. One of the first things I would suggest a person does is to either go onto our website, which is nice and simple, quirkyfox.co.nz, or go onto our social media. I tend to focus on Instagram over any of the other social media platforms. So that is where I feel my voice is the strongest, and it's also where the artists I work with often are found to. Look through either the website or Instagram and have a look at the work and have a look at your work and be honest to yourself about it. Is it at the level that you're seeing? Is it not necessarily similar style? I'm open to different styles. But as I say, is it representational? If you're an abstract artist, there are some amazing galleries that will represent you. There's amazing opportunities. I'm not one of them. And as if you email me, it's not going to change my mind. And that's not going to be fair to the other artists that I work with. And that's where my heart will always be. That if an artist has trusted me enough to work with me, every decision I make has to represent them as well. And that again comes down to the exclusivity. I won't bend on that because every other artist has agreed to that and made sacrifices for that. I'm not going to change my mind on that because that's not fair to any of the other artists I work with.
Yeah.
So have a look through Instagram and our website, and then there is a submissions page on our website that says what I would like to see from you. And I'm not that scary. Just introduce yourself and your work and have some representation of your work, so some images connected, as well as either your website or your social media page, and it's whichever social website you use. And I normally try to get back to people within 2 weeks. 2 weeks tends to be the longest I take, but there is only me. So between the gallery and the framing, I sort of joke it's 2 full-time jobs with one person. But I also want to be fair to anybody that does take the time to put in a submission. It takes courage to put in a submission. It's not an easy thing to do. So I want to make sure that I've got the time to go through what you've written to me, but also your website, your social media. I'm not just going to make a decision based on the three or four images you send through to me. I want to make sure that your work is consistent, and I probably do judge a little bit on how that initial communication happens. As you've probably picked up, communication is a big thing for me with my artists. And so I like working with artists that I like. I don't want to work with somebody that I'm going to have conflict with. It's too much of an intimate relationship in a lot of ways. You're sharing your hopes and dreams with somebody. And I don't want to be working with people that are hard to work with. So just have a look through. And as I say, I will always get back to people. And even if there's not the right fit for the gallery at the moment, I do keep note of everybody that's been in touch. And I do circle back through those names every so often to see, okay, I've got this exhibition brief. That person wasn't right at that time, but they might be now. So sometimes a no in the moment isn't a no for forever.
Yeah, that's so true. And do you like it if the artists who you don't accept at the time keep in touch with you?
Absolutely. It's a nice little reminder that you still exist. And it can be a little email to say, hey, I've just done this new bit work, or interacting on social media, supporting one another, interacting on those posts is always a really good way too.
Yeah, totally. And when you think about your stable of artists, how do you encourage them to experiment or explore different ideas or different styles? Or, do you need them to stick with what they initially kind of presented to you? Or how do you feel about that?
I really love that question. I quite often will tell my artists to have fun. I know some galleries very much want, if that's the work you known for or the style you're known for, you should always be presenting that. But I'm a little gallery in the middle of nowhere. It's the best testing ground you're ever going to get, because you don't have to do what you've always done, enjoy it, have passion for it. That will come through in the final result. If you're going through something, use your art to process it. So I love not knowing what I'm going to get from my artist. I love getting emails or even parcels where I literally don't know what I'm going to open, and it gets to be a surprise because, as I said, a lot of my art has come down to having a personal connection with them. Their art is always going to represent that, whether it's in a completely different medium or style to what I was first introduced to them as. So I think it's important that you have time to play and do different things. And as I say, I figure it's it's a little bit of a risk-free testing ground because you have fun with it. What could go wrong? The worst thing is somebody doesn't buy it. But that's not a bad thing. It just means that the right person hasn't come along. So I do enjoy when my artists experiment, and I also like to force them to experiment to some degree. So each year I have a small workshop, and for a lot of artists, that's the challenge working on a smaller format. But it gives them that chance to try out that idea they've had floated around that weren't sure how it was going to be received. This year, our small work show is on little plywood diamonds. Hardly anybody works on a diamond shape. It's not what you go to the shop and buy as a canvas. So that forcing people to have fun with it and think outside of the normal square or round canvas. Yeah. And they've got the choice of whether they want that diamond to be vertical or horizontal. I sent them out without hangers on them because I don't want to restrict what they do. And the early previews I've had coming through already, I've got one artist that has used 4 diamonds and actually made a quadrilateral out of them. So it's going to be the beetles, and it's a different beetle on each diamond, but it works together as a whole as well as separate pieces. Mm. Yeah, I think having fun and experimenting and pushing yourself, I definitely encourage it. And I also think it's a compliment if artists do that, because then they feel comfortable with me. They feel comfortable with the gallery to take those risks. They don't feel bound by a certain expectation.
Yeah.
And I want my artists to feel comfortable with me. I want them to feel comfortable taking those risks and experimenting.
I love that. And that is such a unique approach, I think. It's pretty special. I'm sure there's people listening that will be thinking, oh my God, this is like my dream opportunity, my dream gallerist, because it's not something, I mean, a lot of gallerists are super supportive, most of them are, but I think that's quite a fresh approach in some ways. It almost feels like you're really honoring their practice and trusting them to, explore and encouraging them to explore, which is so good. And what would happen if you unwrapped an artwork and you're just like, oh my God, this is bad. I really don't like it.
It depends on in which way it's bad, if that makes sense. And that's because the skill or technique isn't up to it. I think that never happened. Because I've picked artists, I've worked with artists that are technically good. They've worked hard to develop their skills. They are constantly developing their skills and evolving. If that's bad, is it because I don't like it? That's what it comes down to. And I don't have to like every piece. It's going to be a very boring gallery that uh, everybody has different tastes, and that's the fun bit about life, about art. If we all had the same thing, it would be terribly boring. As I mentioned before, I don't want art that you're going to go to your neighbours and your mother-in-law and see exactly the same print on the wall. I want pieces that make you think, that you connect with. And if I don't connect with a certain piece that's come in, that piece is just not for me, but it might be for the person that walks in the door.
Yeah, yeah, so true. And from a business point of view, how do you approach it when an artist really isn't selling very well, or they were selling well and now they're not selling well, or, how do you manage that kind of thing? And have you ever had to let an artist go?
It's hard, but not for the reason that most people think. It's hard because I feel like I'm letting the artist down, and I don't ever want to let any of my artists down. And you take that personally, both as a gallery, but also the artist, and it affects your self-esteem, and it it comes back to that bit of not fitting in, of not being good enough. And I don't want any of my artists to feel that way, but art is all about the right person at the right time with the right amount of money walking in the door or finding the website. And at the moment, it's particularly hard. The New Zealand economy, the global economy, isn't great. Art sales aren't what they were. There's a lot more competition, not just in terms of there's more galleries, you've got more websites, you've got things like Etsy, and I hate to say it, Temu, but it's also you've got AI, and it's harder to get people to appreciate the time and workmanship that goes into a piece of art. So it's really hard when an artist doesn't sell, but as long as they are happy to stay with me, I will keep working with them because, as I say, it just takes that one person to walk in and love that piece of work. That piece of work might have just come in the day before, or it might have been there for 2 years, or it might have been an older work that the artist has sent through and it just didn't find its home yet. It will find a home, but it's just waiting for the right person. The only time I have got rid of artists is, and I have given them the choice in it, is when they've broken that exclusivity course. Obviously, New Plymouth is a bigger city. It's only an hour away. It has galleries there. They approached my artist, and unfortunately, it has happened. And I get the appeal. It's a bigger city. It's more exposure. But as I said, I've got to be fair to the artists that are honouring that deal. And I have always said to those artists, it is your call. You can be represented there or you can be represented here, but you can't be represented at both. Whatever decision you make, I will support you in, but you cannot have it both ways because that's not fair to every other artist that I work with. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, yeah. And that's fair. And you mentioned AI. I know that you are quite strict that there's no AI involved in your artist practice within their process or within their actual final work. So what's your take on that?
I've done a lot of research into AI image generators and also how they were trained. I think at this stage in time that the main image generators, I refuse to call them art, have not been trained in an ethical way. It was fed off images on the internet. No permission was granted by the artist. They have not received any compensation for their information being used to train something that is being projected as something that will replace them. I don't think, or at least I don't hope it will ever replace artists. Computers and feelings are two different things. And as you've probably picked up on, I'm big on connection with art. You don't connect with a computer. Computer is a tool. It doesn't have emotion, so you can't form that connection to it. I'm also aware that a lot of the image generators, the models they were trained on, have inherent biases in them that people may not be aware of. So two of the early players, there were differences in the type of images that they were actually showing, and that resulted in very different images being produced. So one of them wasn't fed any violent images, which sounds good in theory and what you would hope. But unfortunately, historically through art, a lot of violence in art has been portrayed against women. So this meant that women were not represented equally in the images that that particular model was actually producing. The other one was trained with violent images, and it didn't have any clauses against nudity. Guess who is predominantly nude in artwork? So again, you had this bias coming through where violence and nudity was predominantly women, violence against women, and women were nude compared to men, regardless of the prompt being put into these generators. In the early days, this was actually easier to pick up because you could see that the women were hypersexualized. You had the big boobs, the little skinny figures, because of the type of data that was being put into these machines. That bias came from the humans that were creating the model. They aren't without bias. But a computer can't explain why it has a bias. A person can. And again, that's part of art. So that's part of the reason I'm against AI. I also recognize how much hard work and how much sacrifice goes into producing art. No artist starts off great. There is hours and years of hard work that goes into being a good artist. They're constantly developing their technique. Just because I can type something into a computer does not make me an artist, and that does not make what it produces art either. The word art itself means that there's some craftsmanship behind it. That's why you have art. It's why you refer to classic buildings and concepts as artistry, because there was work, there was sweat, there was tears, there was curiosity. And as I say, a computer doesn't have curiosity. It hasn't had to work. It's been fed what it should produce. And to me, that is an art. And at this stage, I haven't discovered anything to change my stance on where AI fits within the art world.
Mm.
I know that a lot of people say inevitable that it's here. Why not embrace it? And there are galleries that can do that if they want to. But Quirky Fox is not one of them. And at this stage, it never will be either.
Yeah.
And again, I want to acknowledge the work that my artists have put in. I'm not going to put somebody that put a prompt into a computer and printed it out on the same wall as someone that put 100 to 100 hours into producing a piece of art.
Yeah, brilliant. Well said. Yeah, very well said. So can we talk now about your actual gallery? You've just moved quite recently into a bigger space and you are in the process of sort of refitting and renovating that.
So my previous gallery was lovely. It had an exposed brick wall, it had metal beams. It was all of about 2 metres wide. So if you got a tram and a wheelchair and there was a traffic jam, it also made it very hard for openings because you couldn't fit a lot of people in and it sounded very loud very quickly. We're also doing framing out the back, and as I say, it was only about 2 metres wide. My entire workshop was 2 metres square. I would have to use the florist next door to me after hours sometimes when I had bigger works to do because the space wasn't big enough. And as well as those restrictions, the gallery had grown, it had outgrown the space. It was a really good place to develop in, but I had grown too big for it and I needed that extra room. And I wanted to be able to give people a better experience when they were viewing the art too, to be able to see it from different angles, different distances, which in a little narrow shop is pretty hard to do.
Yeah. This new space, you have sort of a gallery space and a space just for the exhibitions, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So my move was, I'm going to say it was a little bit traumatic, and that I were initially meant to move 3 years ago. And I had a beautiful historic building lined up, and unfortunately, the landlord and the builder kept setting dates but failing to meet those dates, which had a very negative impact on the gallery. It meant I couldn't really plan my exhibitions because the difference in size between where I were and where I were moving into was huge. It was 3-4 times the size. So an exhibition planned for one space wasn't going to work in the other space. So eventually I have to put up with this for a while. I decided to buy a building myself, and that way I were in control of things. And if I said the deadline was then, that was what was going to happen. So in October this year, I managed to find a lovely building that was part of the town's paper plug. They had downsized the paper plug, and it had been in the same family for over 60 years, and it was renovated in a very quick period. And I separated it into 2 spaces. So I've got the front of the gallery, which has my regular artist, prints, etc., and the framing sample. And then I have a separate room, which is for the exhibitions. And that has been amazing because I can shut it off if need be, so I can hang and unhang without interruption and without worrying about work getting damaged. If I want to have artist talks, it can be separate. They don't have to worry about the noise from outside. Potentially in the future, I might have some workshops that would fit in that space as well. And owning the building has meant that I got to do what I wanted. So I could do the lighting that works best for a gallery. It all has hanging rails, so I can move things around constantly. So it's been an adventure. The inside of the gallery was completed and I moved in over Christmas and New Year. Now, when you walk past, you can't miss the place. It used to be 2 steps and you would pass it. Now, it actually takes a few more footsteps to walk past.
That sounds amazing. And good on you for, bringing all of that knowledge and experience together and managing to actually purchase a building is amazing. And then to make it your own must be so exciting. And I love your attitude. You're such a beautiful person to speak with because you're so passionate and it's like this one big family that you sort of support and love and nurture and then they give that back to you as well, which is it's so lovely.
I hope so. I hope that's how my artists see it as well.
I'm sure they do. And can we talk just briefly about your exhibition program across the year?
So I have approximately 7 exhibitions each year. I do book my exhibitions quite far in advance. Now now I know my space. So I have just about fully booked 2026. I am working on 2027 and I have some of that already booked. So once I have the 2027 in place, I will be back to what I consider on schedule. So as I say, I plan in advance. So it's normally about 2 years in advance. And again, that's partly because of the calibre of artists that I'm fortunate enough to work with. They need to be able to schedule that far ahead. But it's also with me being the only person doing everything, I need to have that timeline. So every year in July, I have our birthday exhibition, which is the biggest exhibition I have each year. And a portion of the sales from that always goes to a charity of my choice. And generally, they are either a mental health related charity or an animal charity. So in the past, we have done Lifeline Aotearoa, Takapo Recovery, and our most recent one was Women's Refuge. As a small business, you get approached for donations regularly and you want to help out, but it's not financially possible. So this has become what I've decided to do, that I give one decent donation once a year rather than chip away
Yeah,
at it.
that's a great idea.
I occasionally, and I'm starting to do it more, is I will also ask my artists what charity they would like to see supported. So another exhibition, we actually did funds to Ukraine, and I had a couple of Ukrainian artists in that exhibition as well. This year, as I said, we did Women's Refuge, and I had an exhibition called Daughters of Eve that is going to become a biennial, so every 2 years exhibition. And that particular exhibition explores women through history, literature, and mythology. So it's looking at the women that get overlooked, the women that were, again, said to be the weird ones that didn't fit in and were punished as witches, or their knowledge was overlooked and attributed to others. So that's always an interesting exhibition to have.
Yeah.
And then in November, December each year, I have a small works exhibition. And that's one where I've really encouraged my artists to have fun, but it's also given an accessible point to original art too, because everybody should be able to access art in some form. And for a lot of us, it's through print, but sometimes having smaller works means you can access an original. So that's really nice to be able to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And we sound extremely organized. And I imagine a lot of your artists take a long time to make their works because they're mostly all very detailed. Yeah, yeah. And how do you go about pricing artworks?
Pricing is the worst part of the job. I don't think anybody enjoys pricing. I will advise my artists I won't dictate a price, if that makes sense. So I don't think I've ever told an artist their price is too high. Maybe once or twice if it was a big leap from what they've been previously shown work as. I have, however, encouraged them to increase their prices. And that's not because I want to make more money as a business, but because I think they've undervalued themselves. They've undervalued their time and their skill. But pricing is definitely something nobody loves. I've gotten better at it over time. I can't say I have a formula for it, but a lot of my artists do ask me for advice, or do I think this is the right price? It sounds terrible, but I can't explain it other than I go with what's in my gut. I will have a number after looking at other people's work of theirs and against other artists of a similar standard. And somehow that number pops in my head, but I couldn't give you an exact formula.
Yeah.
I do think it is important as a gallery, though, to be there to discuss pricing with artists. And as I say, I think it's very important to tell your artists when they are undervaluing themselves, not so that you can make more money, but so that the artists can see that they have developed, they have more than earned that. And we're all the harshest judges of ourselves. And that's especially true of artists, and that can be reflected in pricing sometimes too. So that's my job, is to remind them, actually, it's worth more than that. You're worth more than that.
Yeah, which is so great to have. It's like an advocate for the artists. And I guess you're also considering consistency with, their bodies of work and also
absolutely
with the other work that you have in the gallery. What commission do you take?
I work on a 40% commission. GST is a fun element of that. So for a long time, the IRD in New Zealand didn't have a specific bit of information on how galleries were to treat non-GST registered artists versus GST registered artists. And every person that rang seemed to get a different bit of information from them. I think it was 2002, they came out with a document that had best practice for it, and that's how I work on my GST. But it's pretty much, once you take into account the GST, particularly because I'm dealing with a lot of international artists as well, which obviously aren't GST registered. My standard commission is 40%, but that varies occasionally. Sometimes there's individual circumstances that come into play too. So it's not a hard and fast, but it's a general.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you for sharing that. And who is your audience?
It's just people looking for something that speaks to them. Maybe it's the other misfits. Maybe it's the other people that have never fitted. And or maybe it's the people that are still curious, that haven't given up learning, that still want to discover new things and know they don't know everything, but are willing to learn.
Oh, well, Vicky, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. I've just gained so much from this conversation. I have so much admiration for you and what you're doing and what you're creating and the beautiful connections that you're building. And, you know, I can imagine that you're not only your gallery artists, but also your audience and your, you know, people who pop into the gallery, you're creating a really amazing, strong community. And then you're also an incredible role model for people who have had things they've got to deal with through their lives. And I think that is incredible. So thank you so very much for sharing your story. And I can't wait to get down to Hawera and come in and meet you in person and see Quirky Fox in person as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.